All right, thank you. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Planning and Capital Programs Committee this morning for Thursday, March 31st, 2022. Everybody sign in, please. And I guess that'll subsidize for a roll call. Is that right? I don't think I've signed in. Have I signed in? I think they signed in. Okay, so everybody, all right, okay, looks like, okay, all right, so we're ready to go then. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes of the February 24th, 2022 meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to these minutes? If not, is there a motion for adoption of the minutes? Oh, we got it. We can't do anything else unless you guys approve these minutes. Okay, all right. Tyrene is the one messing up here, not me. Okay. Okay, first item is a resolution. Oh, we got a vote. Okay, the minutes are approved and adopted. First item is a resolution authorizing a modification in the contractual authorization for planning, support, and technical services. RFP P39820. Shelley Pert, Director of Project Development. Shelley? Good luck.
Really? Good morning, Chair Floyd, Mr. Greenwood, members of the board. So I'm back again this morning. Wasn't successful the last time, but I think we will be this time. So we wanted to bring to you a resolution authorizing the modification for the contractual authorization for planning support and technical services, and that's contract number P39820. Next slide, please. Again, we're going to go over just I know we did this before and everybody's maybe familiar with it, but we'll just run through what the planning department is responsible for, a little bit of background on our planning support and technical services contract, the board request that we have from you, and our recommendation. Next slide, please. So the planning department, planning and project development department falls within the capital projects expansion and innovation team. We are responsible for the planning, design, scheduling, monitoring of bus and rail services, long-range planning, identifying future locations for capital expansion projects, et cetera. The board authorized the planning support and technical services contract in 2018, and that's a key component that we use for the delivery of the MARTA expansion program. Next slide, please. A little bit about the contract itself. The planning consultant services, they provide necessary and critical support for the development and implementation of planning, real estate, transit-oriented development. A few of the things that they're responsible for: corridor planning studies, community outreach support, technical support services. These services are delivered by three primary firms and their subs. The three firms are WSP, HNTB, and AECOM. Next slide, please. Wanted to point out a few things about the contract itself. What we do in the planning department is we take these studies, these preliminary studies, analyses, to a 30% design. And I'm mentioning that because we'll come back to that number and why we need the funds that we need right now. We're taking it from concept, just something that's on a piece of paper. We're studying, we're going out to the public, and we're doing a little bit of engineering. We're taking it to a 30% design, and that does require a little bit more than a usual planning study would take. So just wanted to point that out. AECOM, WSP, and HNTB, they were all qualified equally, and we listed a few of their qualifications here on this slide because I think that came up in the last meeting. Wanted to let you know that we showed you here a list of all the projects that we have, quite extensive. We have a few pending and then when I say pending, for fiscal year 22 work orders that are still needing to start and to kind of keep going to get us through most of the projects that we're doing. This list of projects, they represent the board-adopted commitment to local jurisdictions, and that's key. These are all the commitments that we made with the 15th, maybe even prior 14th amendments, and it's represented here in this list. Next slide, please. So just to go over where we started and where we are today and why we need the additional funds. In 2018, we started with a budget, authorization budget that is of $40 million. We quickly realized that we were going to need some additional funds going in there. So the first modification was in 2019 for $26 million. This year, we added, with the GM's contingency, $3.3 million, and then a few weeks ago, the board gave us another $5 million. So what we have for contract authorization right now is $74.3 million. To date, we have authorized $65.5 million in contract. We have pending for this fiscal year another 2.3. And then we're estimating that for 2023, we'll need around $28 million to complete the work that we're doing for the 5-year contract. So in total, we're estimating that we'll need around $96 million to complete all the work that we're doing. And again, this is taking most of the work that we're working on to a 30% design, and hence the reason for a little bit more funds than we'd normally see in the planning department. And I wanted to also point out here that for the planning department, our investment, the work that we're doing, we're responsible for about $4 billion worth of projects that we're developing. And of that $4 billion, we're utilizing a little under 2.5% of that program. So we're coming in under 100 million, not 100,000. The amount paid out, actually paid to our consultants to date, is 46.6 million. And so the request that we're asking for is an additional 25, and that was, the original ask was 30. We got the 5. Now we're asking for 25 more. Wanted to just kind of highlight that we're working with our consultants on DBE. The entire goal for the project, the entire goal for the contract itself, the 5-year contract, is to meet a 25%. And you can see here where we are. We are actively working with our consultants to keep that number moving. Next slide, please. So why is board action needed? The primary reason that we need board action is so that we don't have to issue any stop work orders. We want to keep moving on the projects that we're working on. And as I mentioned before, we have approximately $2.3 million worth of work that's still pending for us to start working on. And, we have a short time frame right now to try to get those moving. We have, and I think it's a good thing that we have an increase in work demand, and we'll continue to see that because we are continuing to work with our jurisdictions to try to meet the goals that they have asked us to meet. We also need a time extension on our contract. The current contract expires in January of 2023, so we need an additional 6 months to finish our work and also to try to get us on the fiscal calendar as with the rest of MARTA. So basically, that's why we need board action. That's why we need the additional $25 million. And I think the next slide is basically just our recommendation for the additional 6-month increase and the $25 million. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Just to clarify a little bit for me now, this change will give us time from January of next year to June of next year.
Yes, sir.
And the $25 million you need will carry us through that time.
Yes, sir.
And I think one of the things that everybody's concerned about, first of all, we started with 40, and now we're at 75 or 90 or whatever the number is. I can't remember that. But so what happened? Why the big difference from what we thought in 2018 or whenever that was to today?
I wasn't here when we initially started with the 40, but from what I can tell is initially when you're thinking about doing an analysis of a project, and a lot of the things were assumed, but we had to go and verify. And once we started uncovering a lot of things, we realized that we couldn't just take like a look like this. We had to take a look like this. We had to look at a broad spectrum of things that we can do in order to meet the funds that we have to do the projects that we have to do. Instead of just, saying, okay, it's just going to be local buses, we said, okay, no, we can't just do local buses. Let's look at the gamut of things. So that requires a lot more time, a lot more people working on the projects. And I think then taking things to the 30%, trying to develop and get folks to agree on, yes, this is a concept, we're going to move forward. We realized that the scope just kept increasing. The work is still there. We've had additional requests from our jurisdictions for more work and more studies to be done, and we've just grown.
Okay, thank you. And I think one of the things that, Manjeet?
Yeah, and I just want to add too, the planning and project development phase of an expansion program is the most difficult phase, because this is the time when we're studying a range of reasonable alternatives, and there's difference of opinion about what is the right project. So it takes a lot of thought in our process to do that work and come to a decision about what is the right project to build. So the planning and project development phase is the most complicated and most contentious, and therefore requires more resources than one would expect.
Okay, I think one of the things that, if I remember back in those years, what we were concerned about at that time was the slow process it was taking to develop work and to get it moving. And I think hopefully what we're seeing here is that we're getting more done with these things, getting it done a little quicker, and we're moving some of these projects ahead a little bit better, a little bit expediting some of the work that's in here. Is the scope of work within this 30% changing any?
I'd say some of the scopes have changed. We've, like I said, we've started looking at certain things and then grown from there. But in terms of the goal, the ultimate goal of providing the service, that of course hasn't changed. Processes have been developed, which is a good thing for us now. And as you hear in other presentations to come, being able to rely on the services that are being built up right now to support us, that's helped a lot. But we started, when I started here, we had 2 people working on this whole list that I showed you before. And so we've had to get staff in, and some things took a little bit longer because we had to get bodies in to start working on it, on everything. So I think we're at a place right now, we have identified the resources that we need in terms of bodies and the funds that we'll need to finish the work and kind of keep it moving. So I guess in short, the scope really hasn't changed, it's just growing a bit.
Okay. And then one of the things I will be looking at, I think sometime is the next phase of this, in the next budget. Are you all beginning to talk about that now?
Yes, we are, sir.
Are we looking at the same funding level for that?
It's going to be a little bit less.
Okay.
Because in the planning and project development department, we're going to be focused now on just planning, the concepts. And we're going to do the PE in infrastructure and design and capital programming, it's called, yeah, under Larry's group. So we're going to take things to maybe a 10, 15%. So we're not going to see the numbers that we saw before right now, where we're taking it to a 30% design.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Are there any questions?
Mr. Mullis was first, I believe.
Mr. Mullis?
First, I'd like to thank you for bringing it back to the board and to the committee, and the detail is appreciated very much, and I'm inclined to support this, but I do have a couple of questions about the DBE numbers first. Mm-hmm. What is our plan to get the DBE numbers up with this new authorization?
Thanks.
Good morning. Wanted to address that. So my office has kind of been looking at these numbers that you have there and talking to the actual vendors. And what we have realized is that there are a number of outstanding DBE invoices that have not been included in those numbers. So one of the things we've got to do is make sure those DBE firms get their invoices in. So when I say outstanding, they haven't even processed them in, but they've done the work. So we need to get those so that we can actually include it in those numbers. So that's one of the things that we're working on, which will make a difference in the numbers. And then the other thing is we've talked to the firms as well, because some of them will still be below the 25%. So we've talked to them and about the upcoming task orders, and some of the upcoming task orders will be heavily loaded with DBE firms. So the goal is 25% at the end of the contract. And so we just want to make sure that they're staying in line with being able to meet that figure for the end of the contract. So we are working with them to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, I really would like to see that happen, and we're going to watch that very closely. But
Okay.
you just said something that's I'm kind of interesting to repeat with the other two members who are presenting. You said that there are some outstanding invoices that have not been processed yet for this scope of work?
Yes, but my understanding from talking to the firms is that the DBE providers haven't actually submitted the invoices yet. So it's not that they're waiting on MARTA to process them.
I'm a small business owner, and I know that I can't wait to submit an invoice. And I asked a very direct question the last time that came up about outstanding invoices, and I was told that there would not be any outstanding invoices. If I would have known that there was an outstanding invoices, I would have said approve it immediately, because I know small businesses cannot wait 30 days to get paid. So I would always encourage the staff, especially when we have a DBE program, to pay these invoices immediately. But I'm going to.
I think.
I'm going to support this.
I think what I heard Paula say is that it's not that they're waiting for MARTA to pay, it's that the DBE themselves have not billed us yet. So we simply can't pay a bill we don't have. As soon as they do provide the bill, that's a priority for us.
Okay, now there's another. Rita, sorry.
Yes, I have just that was part of my question, but thank you. I am concerned when I hear that the DBE goal is expected by the end, because then the project would be over and what has happened in between. That's a concern. But in regard, you mentioned Amendment 14. So this additional funding, is there any scope of work that also includes Amendment 15 that's included in this planning?
It's the 15th Amendment. I was just speaking holistically that we are meeting our commitments from our amendments and our, just work ahead. No, this is all 15th Amendment. My
Pardon me?
apologies. This is all 15th Amendment.
Okay, I heard 14, so
Sorry.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, is there a motion for adoption of this resolution? Okay, there's a motion for adoption, and I don't know that I see who did that, but, and a second. So all in favor of the resolution, please vote now, or whether you're for it or against it, vote now. So. And the motion carries, so the resolution is adopted. It'll take a little while to get used to this way of doing stuff. Okay, the next item is a resolution authorizing the award of contracts for the procurement of infrastructure, architectural, and engineering consulting services, REI AE 49819. Larry Prescott, Assistant General Manager, Design, Engineering, and Infrastructure, and Interim Assistant General Manager, Capital Programs Delivery. We'll need a bigger business card, I'm thinking.
Yes, sir. It's
But,
on the back.
This is a resolution authorizing the award of contracts. So, Larry?
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mayor Pond, or Mayor
Standing.
Floyd, sorry.
Standing.
Automatic there. Good morning, everybody. Mr. Greenwood and board members, gallery. I'll repeat it. This is before you is a resolution for the authorization award for contract for the procurement of infrastructure A&E services for REI AE 49819. Next slide, please. So last August, I was here requesting the procurement for this program and pretty much described the current program that we have with the 4 teams out there. They expire this year between this June and September. And what I've done is taken these 4 and combined them into one program. And so back in February, we received 10 qualified A&E proposals. Our source evaluation committee reviewed those and scored them and shortlisted the 4 teams for oral presentations. Those presentations were held in later February. So next slide. So again, purpose of this is taking those multiple discipline contracts that were separated, combining them into one program, give us better efficiency of managing contracts and programs, projects with one-stop service rather than multiple contracts. This gives us a much more efficiency and pretty much goes beyond the current station rehab program for the A&E services we have there. So this is beyond the station. So it covers all the state of good repair and operations support that we can do for the program. Next slide. So this is a $30 million program over 5 years, $6 million per year with a base of 3, then 2 one-year options after that. This program will be funded on the fiscal years by the capital program budgets, our projects as they come along. And I want to go back to reference to the previous general engineering consultant, the GECs that we had before, the MAT-T, MAT-Cs, prior years. They ran at around $25 million a year for our support program. So stepping back to $6 million a year, we've been a little bit more efficient, not having them in-house in our headquarters or the annex. So anything COVID has done is shown us to be much more efficient working from their home offices and pulling them only as needed rather than having them in-house. So they're on call as services. So next slide. So the SEC would like to recommend these 3 firms, H&TB Corporation, Pond & Company, and WSP USA. The consultants for each one of these firms is listed underneath the titles there, and the DBEs are highlighted bold and italic. The DBE percentage is 10% for this contract. And I also want to point out that based on earlier discussions with this board in the presentation that we did have a medium-sized firm that qualified and was selected to help cover smaller type projects. Next slide.
Would you say that again, please? The medium-sized firm?
Yes, we had the pond falls in the middle of between the 2 bigger firms, and they qualified for the program, and they were selected to help us work on smaller type projects rather than the large projects. And a little bit more efficient with a smaller firm and spreading the wealth to medium-sized firms. So with that, I'd like to request for approval of the resolution authorizing the award for this contract for procurement services with the A&E Services REI AE 49819 with H&TB Corporation, Pond & Company, and WSP USA. I'd like to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Prescott?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, once again, I'm glad to see that this is a collaborative effort between our engineers to deliver these projects. We have so much that's on the board that needs to be done, and I think this is a very efficient way for us to get it done. And also, once again, we'll make sure that we give you the resources to do it. We just need to be able to deliver all these projects that we have. It'd be nice if we can do them in a very quickly manner, but I understand it takes time. But once again, if these engineers, as bright as they are, they can all work together to make this thing happen, so we can see these projects that we can actually put our hands on some of these projects when they get built. So I'm in favor of the resolution to move it forward.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
And this is a question in regards to the DBE percentage. So, Ms. Paula Nash. So why is the goal for this one so low? The others are 25, 30%. There's ample DBEs in this area that could meet that number?
Sure. There's two reasons for that. One is the based on the scope of work that we got and the looking at the NACE code for that scope of work, this is what the methodology came out with. Now, we do have some flexibility of raising it above the methodology, but keeping it at the methodology, what it allows us to be able to do is, and I think once before I've explained to the board that we look at race-conscious numbers, goal numbers, and race-neutral goal numbers when we're trying to get our ultimate DBE goal, our annual DBE goal. If we leave it at the methodology level, it allows these agencies to, or these firms to exceed the DBE goal, which actually these firms have committed to doing. And the exceeding over the 10% counts as race neutral. And we do have to get a percentage of race neutral. So that's one of the strategies of why we would do it in this type of contract, where we know that they can exceed and they will have committed to do so.
So if they can, so why don't we just set the bar at, I don't know, 20%? Because 10% is really low. And I've worked with these companies and I know what they're capable of. And in some cases, they would meet the minimum. So there's capacity for us to do more. So is there a possibility that we can look into that?
It's too late for this contract because it's
Okay.
already been decided. But
Okay.
if we set the bar higher, then it counts as race conscious. It doesn't count as race neutral. So there's just a strategy of trying to meet our race neutral number.
Okay. And why is it only based on race? Is it not based on gender as well?
Well, when we talk about in terms of the FTA, yes, for female firms it is. It's a race and gender strategy, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Did that answer your question? Because I'm a little confused too about this race neutral thing. I mean, I always have been. I'm not just today, but did that answer your question, I think?
Kind of.
Okay.
Kind of. We'll have more discussions.
I can't hear.
We'll have more discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Snyder?
Thank you, Chairman Ford. I have a follow-up question about the DBE, because it's always interesting to me how you quantify 10%. Is that a numerical monetary number? Like if we have a $6 million a year contract, is that $600,000? Or is it 10% of all of the qualified DBE firms? How do you quantify it?
So the 10% is a numerical number of 10% of the total value of the contract will go to DBEs of the money. But it's also a numerical number of how we come up with what that percentage would be. We look at all the DBE firms that are certified in the particular scope of this contract versus all of the firms, period, and use a methodology that the FTA gives us to come up with what that percentage would be.
Quick
Kyle?
follow-up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
FTA race neutral kind of analysis.
Yes.
Quickly explain that to
Sure.
me. I would be curious to know how that works.
So the point of the DBE program is to level the playing field for all firms, particularly disadvantaged firms. The FTA asks us to do that as much as possible through a race-neutral means, meaning going out, trying to recruit these firms, making sure that they have notices of projects that are coming up, that they could bid on it, and getting it without putting goals on contracts. Race conscious is when we put goals on contracts. Race neutral is when we get DBE participation without putting goals on contracts. So they want as much done naturally without having to put the goals on contracts. When we do but obviously you can't reach our annual percentage without putting some goals on contracts, and we do that. But we try to, when there is an opportunity for race neutral means of getting a DBE involved, we try to take advantage of that, because we do have to show the FTA that we are doing things to take advantage of that.
One last thing.
Sure.
The race neutral part of that, is that something the FTA has to approve? Or is it just at your discretion?
They approve it in general. So we submit a triannual report, a plan to the FTA of our goal. And so our triannual goal is 23%, DBE goal is 23% for MARTA. We did that based on a forecast of upcoming projects. The 19% of that is race conscious, and the other is race neutral. So it's only a small portion is race neutral, but they do want to see that we are doing something to try to reach that race neutral portion.
Okay. Thank you
And they
for that.
did, yes, and they approved that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Tri-annual, is that once every 3 years or 3 times a year?
That's once every 3 years.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, that's right. Kali?
I just wanted to share with everyone, you know, when I first got here, I sat with Paula and asked a lot of these questions. And what I took away from what Paula had shared with me was, you know, the DBE, disadvantaged business enterprise, was really focused on not only, you know, race in terms of Black, Hispanic, Asian, Pan-Asian, and women, but it was socially disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged. So that socially disadvantaged were the groups I just talked about. Economically disadvantaged was those with less than $1.3 million net worth, including if you discount their primary residence and the enterprise. And so that kind of started me thinking about it's not just a racial issue, but it's the economic part. So then on Monday, just past, I was at the Planes, Trains, and Automobiles thing, and I was talking to a lot of minority-owned businesses. And I haven't come back to Paula with this yet, just haven't had a chance. But what we want to do is Paula's already committed to meeting with, you know, we have primes and then the primes have subs. And we're going to increase the amount of time we spend with those subs just to make sure that while, as Paula's explained, we have a quantitative benchmark, there's a whole lot of qualitative measures that we can take to improve the conditions for the subs so that they can participate more in the program. And I believe after speaking with them on Monday, and we'll share this and open the conversation to others that want to join us, but I think if we can address some of the qualitative issues, then those numbers will just naturally follow. So we're committed to looking at that.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, sorry. Rita?
I think it would be beneficial if it's a question and a comment. First of all, I don't know if MARTA is aware, but there is conversation, or should I say potential for, Congress is looking at not necessarily a goal, because I know that's what it means, a goal. We want to try for it. But I also know that Congress is having discussion at this time specifically when it comes to transit, because our Congressman Hank Johnson sits on the Transportation Committee, and his office is working directly on language for laws to make sure that we reach the goal. They're looking at that on a congressional level. So I would hate for us to be behind if that becomes if it passes in Congress and we haven't reached what the goal is. So I think it would also be beneficial if we had some specific, as a board, information directly on some of the terms that you use, so that, and I know this because I'm working with his office and his staff person that's working and presenting to the committee on what should be a goal and what should be rather not necessarily an attempt to reach the goal, but you must reach this particular standard. So I know that's happening in Congress right now. And I don't want to see us as MARTA not reach the potential of what will become a standard.
Yes, thank you for that, and we will definitely be keeping an eye on what's happening in Congress.
So my
Right.
point was maybe that we need specifically to understand some of the language that, for instance, that you use. I don't know if that would be something under a training or a meeting or something like that, so that this conversation,
Line on the DBE program.
thank you.
Yes.
Rod?
To Paula, I've come out of the engineering consulting world also, and I know Georgia Tech, through their feeder system with Morehouse, Spelman, Fort Valley State, Albany State, Savannah State, produce a tremendous amount of engineers.
Yes.
And I'm very disappointed in this 10%. I would encourage you, for any consulting engineering contracts coming while I'm on this board, that we get closer to the 25% number.
Okay. I think that's a good point. I think we do need to understand what that means and how, I mean, it's great. And one of the things that I think MARTA has done, having spent a number of years in the contracting business, that MARTA does is to develop these contractors, not only in the construction projects, but in the engineering, develop them in a way that allows smaller firms to participate in them. I mean, too often in the past, MARTA has done these big projects that eliminated a lot of good people from the work just because they couldn't qualify for it. And I think one of the things that I'm seeing you begin to do a little better is to develop these projects in a little better form where they're accessible to a lot of people that run smaller engineering firms and construction companies. So,
I also want to throw out, I heard this rate was low, got with Pam down at DNI to discuss the industry. We kind of did a little research in the background. A&E firms have gone up, trending up, but the DBE firms that were qualified through GDOT and in the metro area went down. We can't tell if that's because they graduated or if because COVID took its effect on some of these A&E firms. I'll use an example, Joy Rodefox. She got progressed by GDOT, so she graduated, so to speak. She is currently reviewing that with FTA and diversifying her account to see if she can get that status back, because we use her a lot on our program, so that took a big hit in our group. So industry-wise, it's hard to tell why, but the firms that we did select, all of them have a mentoring program for DBEs that they're pretty consistent with. So that's one of the reasons we did select them, to help that 10%.
okay, any other questions for Mr. Prescott or about this issue? All right. Is there a motion for adoption of the resolution authorizing the award of REI? Well, anyway. Okay, there's a motion and a second. And it doesn't show me anywhere who does that, does it? So I don't need to say that, okay. All right, so, all right, there's been a motion and a second, so please vote. Okay, this resolution is adopted. And I'm scared to say who voted for it and who didn't, but that's all right. All right, thank you. The next item is a resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for Cpmo Consultant Supplemental Services, contract number P43871. Larry Prescott, and I will dispense with the reading of your title this time.
All right. Back again. Before you is a resolution to help increase the maximum authorized contract value for the JRMT joint venture. That's the Jacobs Russell MARTA team, Capital Program Management Services, the contract number P43871. So next slide. A quick agenda. We can look at what the Centralized Program Management Organization is, CPMO for short. Go over the background, the next steps going forward, and the financials. So next slide. So the CPMO provides us with a lot of key benefits for our program. This program has been in place for the past 2.5 years. It's integrated within our capital program projects, expansion and innovation, the CPEI for short, like our acronyms. And it's been very successful so far as we're building this program. Some of the keys that we have are the centralized program management oversight is very proven within the industry to help manage large-scale projects and keep them on track. It provides consistent management of the business units. So we have our 4 groups here, but we also have external stakeholders. Kind of eliminate the silos that we have a tendency to occur within the authority and other agencies. The enhanced monitoring gives the staff, you, the board members, and other stakeholders the ability to see the scope, schedule, and budget project process as it goes along. And one of the key benefits is that this program is integrated with both MARTA in-house staff as well as consultant staff, so it's not all consultant. Next slide. So quick history. Back in 2015, a study, external study was done, and it pretty much pointed out there was no Cpmo. There was lack of consistency across the board with project management, processes and procedures, budgeting, cost estimating, and that kind of put us at a possibility of risk of the program moving forward, budget being expended appropriately, and schedules being met for projects. Stuff like the governance program did not exist, and process and procedures were not consistent across the board. 2017, an internal audit was done, and pretty much said nothing had been done since 2015 and that the PMO was still needed. So, next slide. So based on that audit, a program was put together, the Strategic Implementation Plan for the CPMO. It focused on staffing, training, and a budget. The proposed budget was $157 million over the 5 years with a 210-person CPMO team. Focused on that multi-year, $17 million start with a $31 to $38 million per year program was proposed. Next slide. So 2019, after that program, the JRMT, Jacobs Russell MARTA team was selected. The top above the line there are the consultant team members with the DBEs on the right, and then below the line are additional sub-consultants that were added as the program expanded. There are 11 DBEs, and in the upper right-hand corner you can see the 31% goal that was set has been exceeded to 33%, which as of this past December, $8 million has been paid out to DBE firms. Next slide. So I want to go back to the original contracts 2019. Base term, 5 years. We're 2.5 years into that first 5 year. We have an option of a 5-year option after that. Base contract was $28 million. We had a modification for $7.5 million for expanded services, and the $5 million authorization that was given earlier this month for a total of $40.5 million contract currently. Next slide. So I want to flash back to that August 29th meeting where Mr. Rucker presented to this board, and basically says that $28 million would cover the core team resources proposed. And I want to quote the bottom sentence there that's highlighted: as the scope and needs of the program evolve, authorization will be sought for the funding needed for such expanded services. That was done back in 20 for the $7.5 million, and we're here again for the next phase. Next slide. Okay, current status. We've expanded that core staff of 14 people to approximately 60 people now, supporting planning, project controls, construction management, that governance program. I'm sure all of you have seen it. We've been utilizing it. It's keeping projects on track from beginning to end, so there's consistent setup for those projects. Safety and security certification, which helps us meet the GDOT safety oversight program under FTA. And then the technology, of course, with the Unifier program to help us with the program management, and the online invoicing system has been put in place. Next slide. All right, going forward, CPMO has many extensive priorities that we have, and I guess the first and foremost is we want to make sure that internal audit is addressed. We want to put in a sustainable program of project controls, budget management, and process and procedures to make sure that we get all those KPIs addressed. We want to have a team in place to cover all the expanding FTA-funded projects that are coming forward, that increased program coming forward. And then get that staffing, that rapidly accelerating program, we want to make sure the staff is there to provide services for that. So we're going to have a good plan put together for the going forward. Past 6 months, we've addressed what's been going on both internally with our mid-year review, and we've come up with a good staffing plan to help make sure that we have a successful 23-24 going forward. Next slide. That leads us to the financials. So that top box is the contract authorization I already discussed at $40.5 million currently. The actual expenditures, we start off with $4.5 million. The 21 was 13, and then currently halfway through this year, we're at around $7 million. We projected 15, so we're about on track for that. So currently we're at 24.7, throwing that $8 million to finish out this year. We'll be at $32.7 million this fiscal year. Looking forward, that 23-24, we're projecting a need for $30 million per year going forward to add to that to give us our total completion estimated of $92.7 million. Moving down, taking that 40 that we've already authorized, and the need that we're requesting today is the $52,131,854 million going forward. Now, following that blue arrow to the lower right-hand box is a breakdown of the next 2 years. Support for the project management, design, and the capital programs and delivery. That's a pretty high number, helping support our FTEs. We've got a lot of vacancies, and we can't fill those quickly enough. So we're going to bring in this consultant team to set this program up, and then we're going to backfill it as we hire the staff to meet that, as we integrate our staff into that. We currently have a core team, but we're going to have to expand that to meet, and we can't meet that demands, and we want this team to help us get the people in right now. And of course, Cpmo will continue with its $27 million for that total $60 million. Moving up to the right, stick with me here. That blue box, looking at the FY22 program, that $590 million that we have for the 120 plus projects right now, looking at a typical programmatic oversight estimate of 4 to 6% in the industry, it comes in around $24 to $35 million annually. So we're right in the middle of that where we think we should be. And dropping down to the bottom, look at big picture. If Frank Rucker liked to have those 10-year histograms come in, we're looking at the $8 billion. Shelley has $4 billion for hers, so we've got $8 billion for ours. That 4 to 6% brings us in an average around $400 million for that 10-year program. So we're talking a 5-year program, so half that's $200 million, kind of the ballpark range for a big program like that. The original was $157 million, as I showed earlier, and we think we're pretty good at $92.7 million for this program. We've done a pretty efficient job of moving this up. We didn't jump into that $30 million per year, as we saw earlier. We progressed into it. Next slide. So, why board action? Going back to those audit reports again, we need to make sure we take care of those. Without that, lack of consistency exposes us to risk. Those major programs will either be delayed or even halted if the funding runs out. So, major projects, Hamilton, Clifton, South Lake BRT, 285 BRT, Georgia 400 BRT, our in-house state of good repair, traction power substations, as well as the TR4 program. The next 4 bullets, again, covering up that lack of consistency across the board. That 10-year program is at risk, not able to support it and having to push that out even further beyond the 10-year program. And then lastly, that enhanced monitoring reporting. You, the board, the stakeholders, external stakeholders, and our own staff won't be able to understand, or may not be able to, we're at risk again, of not having full program insight in the project scope, schedule, budget going forward. A lot of you here before, when Mr. Rucker presented this program to you, and he's, again, those histograms he showed, the program coming, he kind of showed it as a tsunami of work coming, the tidal wave coming. And he asked us internally, what would we do to prepare for that? When it came to me as a structural guy, I said, I'd build a wall. I want to protect us. I want to be able to divert this and handle this program coming forward. And that's why we're here today. I need help doing that. We need help doing that. Can't do it on our own. So this is a program going forward to build this in an appropriate time before it hits us. Otherwise, I'm going to invest in surfboards to surf the wave. So next slide. With that, I'd like to ask for authorization for the resolution to increase this program for $52,131,854. And I'd like to answer any questions you may have.
One quick question. It looks like this year you're going to spend 14 million or something in that neighborhood?
15.
15,
is
and then
projected.
next year 30?
Yes, sir.
That's a pretty big jump.
Right now, we have that 60-person staff, and we're projecting another, a total of 116 staff to help next year, to help get us up to speed internally as well as externally, and then build that program going forward.
But this going from 15 to 30 involves consultant payment, though,
Yes, sir.
not MARTA payment, right? Not the-
Agreed. So
Okay.
bringing them in, because we can hire them much more quickly, they have staff on hand. We can't hire those people that quickly.
Okay, and, all right, thank you. I'm sorry, Rod?
Again, thank you for the level of detail. Mr. Renaud, I think I asked you last month about the Cpmo breakdown and how that fits with your regular program for state of good repair capital program. And you broke it out for us, and I'm very appreciated. I just want to make sure I'm reading it properly. The Cpmo is $27 million for fiscal year 23 and 24. Is that correct?
Combined, for the 2-year program.
2-year program. And that would include the MARTA program. Is that correct? And then the $20 million for 23 and 24 is everything else outside of the MARTA program. Is that correct?
So this is for the entirety of the capital program. So it includes more MARTA and our other capital efforts.
Yeah, but I'm asking a more specific question. 27 million is for more MARTA, or is it for everything?
It's for everything.
Okay, all right. Okay. And we have an $8 billion program over for the next 10 years. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's our projection.
And out of that $8 billion for the next 10 years, how much is more MARTA?
The More MARTA program, it's a $2.7 billion program over 40 years.
Okay. Okay. All right. So earlier we approved a planning contract where we were taking the design to 30% for the next 2 years under our fiscal year 23 extended planning consulting agreement. Is that correct?
The contract, yes, the way it's written now is it takes engineering to 30%. In the division of labor within the organization going forward, when it gets to the preliminary engineering phase, it's going to Larry's group as the experts in design.
Okay,
The way
so,
we've
but
restructured.
Larry's group will be pulling from your budget, is that correct? For the planning
Correct.
budget? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. And then, so we have 2.5% of the overall CIP going for planning to getting us to 30%. And we have the program managers, where are we coming in, about 4% of the overall budget for that, the CIP? It's about 4 or 5%?
Correct.
Okay. And where do we see the design coming in for the overall budget?
So that's a part of those percentages there. So it's not in addition, it's built within the planning contract. And the Cpmo also provides support for engineering oversight. So when we're advancing past the stage gates, we will do something called a readiness review and check cost estimates and the like.
Right, so we have a plan, and then we have a program manager to make sure that everybody's aligned to that plan. And what are we budgeting for the design to get us to 100% construction documents?
So that is dependent on each project. So there are work orders issued for design on a project basis. So that's, again, depends on the particular project.
It could be 10%, depending on the scope and the complexity of the design and the project.
Yes, typically 4 to 8%, depending on
4
the
to 8%, yeah.
complexity of the project.
Okay, okay. I just wanted to establish that we are, trying to be fiscally responsible and that more than 85% of the dollars would be going towards the actual hard construction numbers. That's what I was trying to get to, okay? I'm in support of this.
Thank you.
Is that right? 85% of the number? Is that correct? Or is it a project-by-project basis? Golly?
It's project by project, of course.
Project by project, so it may be, am I hearing you right, Rod? Some of it may be 80%, some of them may be 90%, so, but 85% is the overall goal, is that the number you're,
You know,
whatever it is?
well, generally, we try not to spend less than 85% of your money for hard costs. You want the money, you don't want to go in it for soft costs, you want it to go to building the building that you're,
Yeah, I understand that, yeah.
right?
Okay. All right, thank
And
you.
as an example, the federal projects require more oversight and administration, so there's higher soft costs that go to federalized projects because of the need to meet the various requirements to accept those federal funds.
Okay, okay. Any other questions about this? All right, then a motion would be in order for the adoption of the resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for CPMO consultant supplemental services. And I see a motion and I see a second. I have no idea who did that. So would you please vote? I've developed a flaw in this whole program here, so. Oh, it's over here. Okay. Maybe the flaw doesn't exist. Excuse me, give me a, okay. Please vote. Where does it say that? Okay. All right, thank you. The motion has passed, and adoption of the resolution has passed. And I think it's pretty obvious that I'm gonna need some training on this thing if I ever have to do this again, which is probably not a good idea. Tyree, this is your fault, Tyree, I'm telling you. Last item on our agenda today is a resolution authorizing the solicitation of consulting services of job order contracting, JOC, RFP P50150. Larry Prescott, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will be
It's the last
referring-
time I want to see you up here today.
Yes, sir. I'll refer to this as JOC going forward because job order contracting is a mouthful. Next slide, please. So the JOC program, it basically is one of our implementation programs to move construction projects forward faster. As you may recall, last year we had the IQCC, the Definite Quantity Construction Contracts, shown in this graph on the lower right-hand side there. They were based on a $200,000 maximum cost per project program. This JOC, we're calling it 3.0 because we've had two versions prior, and this is the third version going forward. It's based on a maximum of $1.5 million per project to establish these quick versions. The programs above that fall within our standard CMAR design bid build program for going up the chain budget-wise. This program is very quick and efficient once we get it going, and I'll go to the next slide. Some of the prior projects on the left side there, a variety of distribution across the program. The elevator that we did at Oakland was very quickly done and efficiently needed. It wasn't within our program, elevator program. We've done some parking, ADA parking, infrastructure improvements, security, training facilities, plumbing upgrades, CCTV, signage upgrades, and ceiling support services. When JOC 2.0 ended, the funding ran out. We had these projects on the right that were still in the hopper, so to speak. They're shovel ready to go. So we have $10 million ready to go in the hopper right now that are on the shelf that just need to be reprogrammed for this. And again, very dispersed capabilities across the line, kind of filling in the gaps between the big projects and the smaller projects the IQCC can't cover. So next slide. So consultant services, that's why we're here today, this JOC program. The consultant services are specialized staff that oversee a JOC program. And in doing so, they set up an established task catalog, so it's predetermined going forward. It's a menu of services, so to speak. So they set up this catalog of services as well as the specifications to go forward with it. They help manage all of these consultants for us because it is a very fast contract program We work hand in hand with this consultant. They are an extension of our staff, and we work with the A&E services and kind of move this forward quickly. We definitely need to make sure that this job consultant has transit authority type experience to help make sure that this is a run-of-the-mill program. Next slide. So some of those key features, as I said, that price catalog comes in up front. It's the menu of services. It helps us to customize those projects for either local funding or federally funding. So we're established for both ways. There's no restrictions on this one when funding comes into play. We treat this kind of like a design build, even a CMAR, where we have some A&E input prior to, so they can do some early services before 100% design is completed. That helps advance this program even quicker. The estimated cost for this consultant service is $4.4 million. It's a 5-year program, 3-year base and 2 one-year options. The Office of DBE hasn't come up with a solicitation for that yet, but it was the 25% for the last go-around for the IQCC. The firm that we had there was a $1 million consultant service on their program going forward. So we've increased it to that point where we have to resolicit now. So next slide. So here's taking this 2-step approach, kind of setting this up. Right now we're here for the consultant services. We want to procure this service so that come October, we can use this consultant to help us make sure that we vet the contractors for the JOC program going forward and make sure that they own these people when they come in. Right now, the IQCC has 1 consultant service, and we have 6 on-call contractors. So basically, we're going to try to do the same thing with this program, but for the larger projects. So going through this process, hopefully by next February, we will be on the ground running with at least that $10 million, if not more, program going forward, because we have time now to get more projects on the SELF. Next slide. So with that, I'd like to request the approval of the resolution authorizing the solicitation for proposals for the procurement of consultant services for the job order contract.
Okay, Rod,
You said that, thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to call on you first every time now.
You said that your DBE previously for the other contract was 25%, and you felt comfortable meeting that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And we saw on the Jacobs-Russell contract, they were at 30, their goal was 31%,
Yes, sir.
and you exceeded that at 33%.
Yes, sir.
As a strategy, and Ms. Nash can come up here also, as a strategy, can we make up some ground on a contract like this for the DBE? Because since we were so woefully low on the engineering contract earlier, could we push this up to maybe 31% since we were so low on the engineering contract? Mrs. Nash?
Sure, let me address that. So we have to follow the methodology that the FTA requires us to follow. And they come and look at that methodology. So we can't willy-nilly just kind of put a number out there. We've actually got to follow the methodology based on the number of DBE firms in the area that we use in comparison to the number of all firms that are out there. And there's a whole formula that we go through to come up with the number. So because the point is, the FTA will say, your number doesn't need to be this high because we're not showing that level of discrimination in your area. So that's why there's the formula for us to follow. So we've got to follow the formula. We do have some discretion, and so we do use that discretion when we can, but we can't just come up with a number that isn't supported by the formula.
Rod, if you don't know, willy-nilly is a very technical term.
Well, I use it all the time in my business.
All right.
Hope that answered the question.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I have one.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Okay, yeah, Mr. Chair, yeah. Once again, I'm glad to see this program move through because, once again, we have a lot of programs where we have a lot of projects that need to be delivered. Now, these projects is on this list. Is this in the area of state of good repair, or this is just outside of that area of things that need to be done for these jobs?
It's wide open. It's
It
right,
is.
right now it's state of good repair, but it's, again, this is to fill the gap.
Okay, fill
So
the
it's,
gap.
it's to fill the gap between the large projects that are big picture expansion and the small $200,000 just repairs. So this
Right,
kind of fills that
correct.
gap.
And these projects are things that are happening, you know, all throughout the stations and facilities that we have, which will make this whole, make our stations look nice and clean, and they won't be having all these issues with water leaking. All these projects help make the stations look nice
Yes, sir.
and attractive, and that's what I like to see, and so I'm in support of it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Reggie?
Thank you, Chairman Floyd. I did want to, I guess, clarify how this works. I understand it's, we're hiring a consultant, I guess, to oversee the review and approval of small contracts.
Yes, sir.
Is that a good way to sum this up?
Yes, sir. Specialized services specifically for these type of consultant contract
Okay.
program.
And the contract is for how long? This,
This
how-
is 5 years.
5 years.
Is it, when the
And
job
so-
contractor comes, it'll be a $25 million program. I'll be back in a couple months asking you for that.
I got you. So the consultant, once they're hired, can they make an independent decision once they get a bid or they see multiple bids from different contractors for one of these jobs? Are they able to independently decide who wins?
No, sir. We
Okay.
have complete oversight of it. It's based on the lowest value, but we also have the justification option to go for a better qualified firm based on the speciality of the situation.
Okay, so is the consultant issuing RFPs, or are they just, are these one-offs, like sort of direct purchase?
We'll pre-approve, like currently IQCC has 6 contractors already on hand. They're pre-qualified, so what they'll do is they'll do a task order request of all those firms and see who has availability of not only speciality, but of the ability to actually build it and the costing. So they have the option, those 6 have the option of proposing on it or not, and then we take those that do and quantify them.
Out of a pre-existing list of approved contractors?
Yes, sir.
So in the tasks that we've got, the upcoming projects, is various different kinds of projects, some of them involving parking lots and some of them involving wireless access points. So there are different contractors for different services.
Yes, sir.
So there's not just a list of 6,
Correct.
period? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, when we did the IQCC, we had 16 proposers, and it was very tough to whittle it down just to 6.
I understand. Okay. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? This, Larry, this seems like an excellent idea and project, and I hope it'll move forward. I caution you that I know when we use local money, we move things ahead pretty quickly.
Yes, sir.
When the federal government gets involved in it, it in most cases stops.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I would encourage you to figure out a way to make sure that we don't, that somehow we keep those things separate, that we are, because if you want to pave a parking lot with local dollars, it's 2 weeks. If you want to pay with federal dollars, it's 3 months.
Yes, sir.
So, anyway, but there's got to be a way, I think, to keep those two separate somehow.
Fortunately, with the $1.5 million cap per project, doesn't really opine to federal funding support.
Okay, so we're staying away from that, which I think is a good thing then.
Yes.
Okay. All right, if there are any other questions about this, there's appropriate for a motion for the adoption of this resolution. It has been moved and seconded. Rod Mellis moved. There it is. Stacy Blakey, right there. Okay. Already been moved and seconded. All please vote. So the motion has been approved for the adoption of the resolution.
Thank you for everyone for
I'd
putting up
like
with
to
me.
comment, you guys, I think you all did a great job this morning presenting these. We've been through a lot of questions, a lot of interest in these. And it's interesting as we move forward into trying to get $8 billion worth of work done, that we are now moving into a section, an area where we're beginning to see. And I've been getting a form from somebody. It lists a lot of projects. Who's doing that? Angie, that? It's got everything. It's got a lot of different kinds of projects on it. It's got a lot of information. You all have been seeing that, haven't you? No? Am I the only one getting that?
Yeah, I'm not sure without seeing it what that is. We
Well,
do
I
have
meant to
the
bring it with me this morning, but anyway, it's got every kind of project you can think of on there. And it goes back a number of years, and it's got the person here at MARTA that's responsible for it. It's got amount paid to date. I mean, there's if you print it out, it's a full program. And I'm wondering,
Otherwise, we have the project snapshot tool on the website.
somebody's sending me that. Is you? Okay, there you go.
Guilty party.
Tooth Fairy, okay.
I kind of thought that was from my department. I'm the Director of Contracts, Procurement, Materials.
Okay.
I don't know how your name may have gotten in that, but we do send that report out to every chief and all of their management level every week. So somehow you're
Okay.
in that distribution.
Well, don't take my name off, please, but I would encourage you to, if you all are interested in the status of a project, especially if it's on that list, then you can look on this list and you can tell from this list what it's done. So anyway, I meant to bring that with me this morning because I wanted to thank whoever's.
That's Jacqueline Holland.
Jacqueline Hall, okay. Unfortunately, Jacqueline, I won't remember that,
I don't
but
think
I will.
we're all getting
The
that.
name I suspect is in the email somewhere, isn't it? Okay. All right.
Otherwise, just to remind the board, a few months ago, we released the project snapshot tool on the website, so you can see the entire capital program there in an abridged version that's perhaps a little easier to follow what the project is about and its progress.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, job well done this morning. Thank you.
I don't think we're all getting that list. I think you're special.
No, only special people get that list. So Rita, I'm sorry, but you're not on that list. So I suggest you take it up with Jackie.
I'm not. Are you on that list, Ms. Blakely?
I am not, but I would like to be as well.
Are you free?
And
to-
Mr. Frierson
No?
would as well.
Okay, you're right. It's on.
Only special people, that's what I thought. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. And if there's any other matters to come before this board I'm not aware of, we're adjourned and we're done. I'm done. Okay. Sure.
I'm going to call this meeting of the Operations and Safety Committee to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the February 24th, 2022 minutes. May I have a motion? It has been moved by Mr. Mullis, seconded. Any discussion or edits? If not, please vote. And the minutes are adopted. Agenda item number 2 is a resolution authorizing the award of a sole source contract for CQ12 door part systems, RFP P49800. Mr. Miller.
Good morning, Chairman Worthy, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Doug Miller, and I'm the Director of Railcar Maintenance. May I direct your item to agenda item number 2. The requested resolution authorizes the General Manager, CEO, or delegate to enter into a contract with Vaporstone Rail Systems for the procurement of railcar CQ312 door system parts, RFP P49800. Next slide, please. I will speak to these areas, explain why the funding is needed, and present the resolution for approval. Next slide, please. This is a 2-year contract in the amount of $1,550,337.30. There are no options. This authorization is being funded with local operating funds, including in the approved FY 2023 budget. Funds for the subsequent years will be included in subsequent annual budgets. Next slide, please. As a core element of the existing Fleet Life Sustainment Program, this effort will provide critical passenger door components that are required to maintain the reliability of the MARTA fleet and allow for on-time delivery of parts with cost certainty. This contract will provide engineering for proprietary components to ensure that parts obsolescence does not impact MARTA's ability to provide reliable rail service to the public and to extend and improve the service life of the vehicles for 7 to 8 more years. This is a last buy of items that will no longer be manufactured. This will maintain adequate stock levels of passenger door spare parts to meet the demands of the legacy fleet and support the transition to the new car rail fleet. This work will be done in-house through parts added to inventory. Next slide, please. Vaporstone Rail Systems is the original equipment manufacturer and sole proprietor of these door components. The Department of Internal Audit is conducting a price analysis to determine fair and reasonable pricing. There are no DBE requirements on sole source procurements. However, Vapor Rail Systems has agreed in good faith to use MARTA-approved shippers when possible. Next slide, please. At this time, I am requesting that the committee recommend to the full MARTA board this resolution awarding a contract for the purchase of CQ312 door system parts, RFP P49800 with Vaporstone Rail Systems in the amount not to exceed $1,550,337.30. Chairman Worthy, I will now turn it back over to you for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. My first question, and we talked about this a little briefly in the pre-brief, but this being a last and final buy is basically because they're not going to make these parts anymore. We're getting as much as we believe we need, but then once we take rolling stock offline, as the new cars come in, we can then pull parts out of there as needed, correct?
Correct. The plan is to use that to supplement as we pare down the fleet. We can harvest parts from.
That was what
yeah,
I harvest
yeah.
parts.
Not just the 312 cars, but all the different fleets as we go. That's built into our plan to try to make economical use of what we can on the cars before we dispose of them or sell them or however each ends up.
Great. Any other questions? Any other questions? All right. No discussion? All right, I will entertain a motion for this resolution. It's been moved and seconded. Please vote. And the resolution passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Miller.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 3 is a resolution authorizing award of a contract for the procurement of diesel tow tractors, IFB B47885. Mr. Chafin.
All right, good morning, Chairman Worthy, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. My name is Britt Chafin. I am the Director of Bus Maintenance. May I direct your attention to agenda number 3. This is resolution IFB B47885 for diesel tow tractors for the bus maintenance department. Next slide, please. Currently, we have tractors ranging between 1983 and 2007 build years. All are over the 15-year useful life, and due to the older equipment, it affects productivity of technicians along with less safety features available with the current fleet. This bid will procure 4 tow tractors to be assigned between all facilities. Multiple peer authorities were solicited to ensure reliability and usefulness of this design. Next slide, please. A tow tractor is a small, powerful diesel unit that allows for safe pushing of our assets without damaging units due to their push bumper design. The unit has capabilities to jump assets and apply air to the systems, and is more economical to the operator with higher visibility. Next slide, please. 20 firms retrieved or purchased a CD for the solicitation. We received 1 bid from Kirk's Automotive, and this contract had a 4% DBE requirement. The vendor in good faith attempted all avenues to assist with transportation of the units from Detroit to Atlanta with no available takers. An audit of pricing has been completed and pricing has been found competitive. Next slide, please. This contract is for 2 years to be awarded to Kirk's Automotive. The 2-year term is in anticipation of delivery time schedules within this volatile market. This contract allows grant reimbursement up to 80%, and this is a complete contract including procurement, delivery, and training for the units. The Office of Bus Maintenance respectfully requests authorization for the resolution to enter into contract with Kirk's Automotive in the amount of $527,328. Next slide, please. I now pass it back to Chairman Worthy for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chafin. I'd like to go ahead and ask Ms. Nash to come up and talk about what gave me pause about no takers, but kind of let you and Mr. Chafin tag team as to why there were no takers.
Sure. Yes. So on this particular procurement, because the actual equipment is already put together, the only thing for a DBE, opportunity for a DBE would be a long haul. So we ended up sending the vendor the list from the Georgia DBE directory of those DBEs that are certified for long hauls. The vendor contacted 22 companies, and just so that we were sure that he in fact did contact them, we actually contacted a pretty good sample of those companies to make sure that they had heard from the vendor. They had in fact heard from him and had declined the opportunity, which is what the vendor told us, that everyone declined the opportunity. So this is a situation where obviously the Georgia DBE directories are the vendors that we're looking at, but the equipment is in Detroit. And so it's a one-way haul from Detroit to Georgia, and it was just because we actually asked them why they were declining. It just was not cost-effective for them to do this. So that is the reason that the vendor could not find a Georgia-certified DBE to meet the goal.
Thank you. Any other questions on this matter?
I have one quick question. This is a purchase of 4 of these units?
Yes, sir.
Why is this a 2-year contract?
It's just in case of delivery schedule problems that we might foresee with the COVID pandemic. We're just having a little bit longer delivery times.
Okay, but is it in 2 different budgets, or is it?
No, sir.
One budget?
One budget, sir.
So just a 2-year, we're giving them 2 years to provide these?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chafin, that kind of goes in with the long haul question. Describe how difficult it is to move one of these things.
It's an extremely heavy unit. It's all put together in one piece. So on your long haul, unless the DBE providers were allowed or had a way to make money on the way up, it's just not advantageous for them to go up there and empty and come back because of the heaviness of the equipment.
And because of the heaviness, that also might lead to shipping delays or something like that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
Chairman, we only have one question.
Yes, Mr. Snyder.
I understand that there's a 60-month, 100,000-mile warranty on each one of these units. How would the repair, if there was a problem, a warranted issue, how would it be repaired? Because I guess the manufacturer is in Detroit.
Well, since it's a diesel-powered unit, then we still have the options to repair it with vendors locally for the diesel-powered unit.
And the manufacturer would cover the cost?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or discussion? With that, I'll entertain a motion for agenda item number 3. It has been moved and seconded. Please vote. And that resolution passes. We'll leave it with Mr. Chafin for agenda item number 4, resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of MARTA buses, RFP P50104.
All right, may I direct your attention to agenda item number 4? This is a request to approve the solicitation for bus procurement, RFP P50104. Next slide, please. Currently, the agency has a contract for 40-foot CNG buses only that will expire in FY 2023. All their buses of different sizes have been procured using option years from peer authorities, which limited the agency's ability to make changes catered to our needs. In transit, the different propulsion types are evolving in a global effort, which MARTA has embraced in the past with CNG and is now embracing with the rollout of EV buses. Next slide, please. Why is this current contract effort different? The contract allows for flexibility. It allows MARTA to pick and choose what best suits our needs for the external and internal customers. 60 feet and 4 different propulsion types. It will allow for competitive bids from multiple manufacturers. Next slide, please. We will use this contract to procure buses in the future, considering service needs and propulsion types. Each year, the requirement for quantity and bus style will be determined, and once this has been determined, the process will be expedited due to contracts already obtained and allow MARTA to present to the board with confidence that we are getting what best fits our needs on an annual basis. Next slide, please. This RFP has a base of 5 years with a 5-year option. There's a possibility of FTA grant reimbursement up to 80%. We anticipate a good turnout from bus builders around the nation. Even though there's a dollar amount attached to this agenda report, this is an estimate based on median pricing over the next 10 years of replacement plan. The RFP will include all aspects of the bus procurement, including delivery and training. The Office of Bus Maintenance respectfully requests authorization for resolution to solicit proposals for bus procurement with a 5-year base and a 5-year option. Next slide, please. I turn it back over to you, Chairman Worthy, for your consideration.
Any questions? Mr. Mullis?
I would like to thank you for adding all the new technology into the bus procurement process, especially EVs. And the buses are near and dear to my heart because those are the folks who really need to use it, riders by necessity. When we are procuring the buses, what component of design and the color scheme of the bus, how are we going to make that more engaging for potential riders of MARTA?
Well, with this option, since we do have the flexibility and we'll have many different options of manufacturers, then we can look at the design as we bid on who meets the specifications. So we're going to look at more ergonomical designs, look at buses that have a more pleasing outlook, and then we'll also take into account the needs of the riders of the size and, like I said, propulsion type when we're determining where these buses are going to be rolling out to.
Ms. Scott?
Yes. What percent of the 17 different bus configurations will include electrical buses?
So the electrical item, so on this right here, it's the, you're going to have electrical option on each size bus, so 30-foot, 35, 40, and a 60. So we did include the options to get specifications for electric on all size buses. And then you'll have a hydrogen over electric cell, and then there's an option for CNG. And we did include an option for diesel, for low sulfur diesel, but that is just to cover all of our bases. And right now we have no intention to have to replace the diesel fleet with more diesels.
So just to make sure I understand, as I've learned from Mayor Floyd to listen real well, you're saying that each of the bus configurations has an electrical option?
Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Hordage?
This might be a question for Collie, I'm not sure, but I know that when we were in Washington recently and talked about some of the federal funding, there's obviously, and I want to say $40 million that's coming back to Georgia for the carbon footprint, which this falls under. So will this help us with some of that federal, will we be eligible for some of the federal funding to maybe offset some of these expenses?
Particularly where we do go with green options, like the electric vehicles, we'll be able to include that funding in our purchases.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, quick question, Thomas.
Mayor Floyd.
I've been hearing a lot lately about some of these, especially these urban areas, looking for smaller buses and smaller options, you know, to do circulator type stuff.
Yes, sir.
Do we have a small enough bus in this list?
The 30-foot bus, and I think that goes with the more MARTA that was done earlier in the past, and it's basically that's what it's for, is for more of an urban area.
So there's nothing, a 30-foot bus is the smallest bus we can buy under this contract?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So you have 30, 35, 40, and 60. And like I said, the 30 is more for your urban area.
And the 60 is the combination of two 30s, really, right?
It's the articulated bus.
Articulated, that's
Yes, sir. So this gives us an option as we see routes that possibly have more ridership that we can choose an articulate in the future instead of sticking with the 40-foot versions we have now.
Any other questions of Mr. Chafin? If not, I will entertain a motion for agenda item number 4. It has been moved and seconded. Please vote. That resolution passes. Thank you, Mr. Chafin.
Thank
Agenda
you.
item number 5 is a resolution authorizing a modification and contractual authorization for vehicle towing services, IFB B39301A. Mr. Morrow.
Good morning, Chairman Worthy.
Good morning.
Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and the members of the Operations Safety Committee. My name is Anthony Morrow. I'm the General Superintendent of Bus Maintenance. May I direct your attention to agenda number 5 for the authorization for the modification of contractual authorization for revenue towing IFB B39301A. Next slide, please. The history of this contract, we began this contract in July of 2018, and it runs until May 2022. The total value of the contract was $737,300, and it covers MARTA's entire fleet, the 539 revenue buses and the 450 non-revenue vehicle fleet. Next slide, please. But unfortunately, the spending of this contract was higher than what we expected. We budgeted $150,000 per year for this contract to run for the total value, but the first year we spent $230,000. Second year, we spent $236,000. Within the first 27 months of this contract, we have spent 79% of the total contract value. Next slide, please. How did that happen? Well, a number of things, contributed to it. Most notably that in the past, the contracts, they was estimated by the historical data. Also with that, we have a number of system failures that we did not expect. We had to name a few, we had a national shortage of coolant sensors. That was a common issue. We had diesel exhaust clogging that not only affected us, but also affected the over-the-road truck fleet. Alternator belt braking, and then came COVID, and then all the battery manufacturers, they pretty much shut down, so we couldn't even get batteries. And MARTA, we use is 8D batteries, which is a deep cycle marine battery that's not regularly used in the car fleet. So the manufacturers, they concentrated on the over-the-road passenger car fleet and just pretty much left us out to dry. And with that, due to staffing issues, we had an in-service truck we have several trucks that roams around the system that tries to fix buses, en route or, at the end of the line they have any issues. But due to staffing issues, we had to shut that down. So if any bus had an issue on the road, we had no choice but to tow it in. With that, like I say, the number of tows are higher, and this exhausted the money more rapidly than we expected. Next slide, please. But like everything, we take this as an opportunity to get better. With that, we used to have, in the past, our towing was just one vendor, for our entire service. With that, we took a look at it, and we could actually split it down into 3 different zones, between Clayton County, DeKalb County, and Fulton County. This gives an opportunity for 3 different vendors for faster service. Also increases our opportunities to have more DBEs to come in and, supply MARTA. We also looked at, how can we get more self-sufficient? With that, there's a 30-ton wrecker, which basically, we have one tow truck now. There's a 2007 model, but we want to buy another one. They're $440,000 each, but we was able to find grant money for that. So this is going to allow us to get self-sufficient. And we are planning on purchasing a rollback, which is basically a smaller tow truck for our non-revenue fleet. We think with these efforts, it's going to allow us to get better and learn from what happened, so I won't have to come back here and ask for money again. Next slide, please. So with that said, the total request is for $301,550,000. This is going to fund the contract for the open invoices that we haven't paid and fund it to the end of May when the new contract was in place. That new contract is on the street right now, and we expect bids to be coming back very soon. So with that, next slide, please. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Mrs. Worthy, and for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Any questions, Mr. Mullis?
Yes. You mentioned that staffing issues has played a role in for you guys exhausting your budget sooner than you anticipated. Where are your staffing levels for the maintenance group, and where do you need it to be?
That question, can I turn that over to Mr. Chafin, the Director of Bus Maintenance, because he'll be better asked that, answer that for the staffing levels for us.
Yes, sir. We're currently 20%, basically about 59 technicians short. That is vacancies. That does not include, though, sick time, vacation leave, COVID statuses, and so forth. So on average, we're running closer to 30% shortage on the floor. But we've been having really great luck at the job fairs. We have quite a few in training, so we are seeing a trend of bringing people back in, and we are hopeful.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask another question? That's a big number, and take care of the people you got, and make sure that you get some retention bonus, because you could wear them out with those levels of staffing. How long does you need to do training if you had somebody green versus if you had somebody who's fully qualified to work on this equipment?
All right, so MARTA has a wonderful apprenticeship program, and it's a 24-month program, which allows people that, like you stated, green, that just want to get into the maintenance field. It allows them to build from zero experience all the way up. So, but it is a 24-month program, so that position is still being taken within our head count, so they're not able to actually help us on the floor, but they are taking a position. So we have quite a few people that normally start on the fueling section, and they go into this class to learn and grow and come over into our maintenance facility team.
So from a recruiting standpoint, you need, you know, some green people, but you really need some experienced maintenance folks in there to kind of alleviate the stress that the rest of the team is experiencing.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And we do hire a journeyman apprenticeship program as well, which that's a 6-month training, so it does expedite it some. But MARTA is huge about making sure that people are, for one, they understand the dangers of working with buses, so we're very safety oriented, and it also allows them to come comfortable and get familiarized with our equipment, so that they're best suited to work on what we need them to work on within the agency.
Well, I would like to see, Mr. General Manager, a plan of action on how we can be more aggressive in recruiting these people, because being 30% down, it could put a lot of stress on the current workforce.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Hardish?
Was that a part of the presentation that that Luz did for us when she did the whole recruitment of all the different areas a couple months ago?
Yes, it was.
I thought we just saw that.
Okay.
There was a plan that they presented to us about that.
Yeah.
Chair Scott?
Quick question. There is a job fair on tomorrow. Is MARTA, not tomorrow, I apologize, on Saturday. Is MARTA participating at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers? It's a huge job fair, which Fulton County is participating. I know MARTA participated at the very last one.
Luz?
Yes, we are.
Great, thank you.
That was, all right. Mr. Friars?
I do
Yes.
plan to be there.
I will not be there, but some of my colleagues will be there. Two of my colleagues will be there.
Great, thank you.
Has the battery shortage issue that you were facing, has that been resolved, or you're still facing the shortages in the supply chain?
We're still facing a shortage. I actually met with our battery distributor yesterday, and we're going to be testing out a different battery than what we have been getting. And those batteries are available, they said. So they're going to ship me 10, and we're going to put 10 on buses next week. So if those work for us, then we're going to switch over that, and hopefully that'll get us away from the shortages that we've been having.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion on agenda item number 5. It has been moved and seconded. Please vote. And that resolution passes. Thank you, Mr. Morrow.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 6 is a resolution. Oh, what's that? Oh, I didn't vote. I voted in the affirmative. I clicked yes, I thought. Agenda item number 6 is a resolution authorizing a modification in contractual authorization for safety, health, and industrial hygiene consulting services, AE 24109. Mrs. Hubble.
Hey, good morning. Chairman Worthy, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and members of the Operations and Safety Committee. I'm Leslie Hubble, Manager of Environmental Health and Safety for the Department of Safety and Quality Assurance. May I direct your attention to agenda item number 6. This is a resolution authorizing the increase of the Safety, Health, and Industrial Hygiene Consulting Services Contract, AE 24109. Next slide, please. This is an on-call services contract currently held by Apex. It's a 5-year base contract term with 5 one-year extension options and a DBE goal of 25%. The contractor is currently achieving 35% on their DBE goal. The 10-year contract term will expire on June 30th at the end of FY23. The current board authorized value of $11.75 million is not sufficient to support the work required through the remainder of the contract. The scope of this contract includes assessment, oversight, and abatement services, those for hazardous materials. And those hazardous materials include, but are not limited to, asbestos, lead-based paint, mold, sewage, and avian waste. The contract also supports our confined space and industrial hygiene programs. In addition to DSQA programs, the contract supports capital projects such as tunnel ventilation, station rehabilitation, elevator and escalator projects, pedestrian bridge rehabilitation, and the rail car programs primarily through hazardous materials assessments and abatement services. Next slide, please. The total contract spend for FY14 through 21 has been just under $8.5 million. For FY22, our committed work order funds are just over $2.65 million, bringing the total spent and committed through the end of this fiscal year to $11.1 million. At the current value of $11.75 million, this would only leave us with a little over $600,000 to operate through the remainder of the contract. As you can see from the graph, spending has increased over the life of this contract. This is primarily due to the addition of Confined Space Assessment Program and increased demand from capital projects related to hazardous materials abatement services. In FY23, we anticipate having no more than $3.5 million in committed work order funds. This does include a contingency factor for unanticipated work due to the nature of the contract. Adding that amount would bring the total authorization of the contract to $14.75 million, which will be sufficient to carry us to the end of the term. Next slide, please. Again, this coming fiscal year is the final year of the contract. The new contract will be discussed in the briefing following this agenda item. Without additional authorization, work orders and change orders needed to support DSQA and CIP projects cannot be executed. Funding is already approved in DSQA's CIP project number 32258 and is also available in other CIP projects that will need support of the contract. Considering the spend to date, committed funds, anticipated work for FY23, and a contingency factor due to the nature of the contract, I'm requesting an additional authorization of $3 million to bring the total contract value to $14.75 million. Next slide, please. At this time, I'd like to ask for your approval of the resolution to increase the authorization for Safety, Health, and Industrial Hygiene Consulting Services Contract, AE 24109. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Hubble. Any questions? Mr. Mullis?
Mr. Chair, this might be a question for the capital improvements team also. Are we covering this scope of work inside of your budget? Or are we, for hazardous material, or are you just using this contract to handle that scope of work? And should we be paying for that scope of work out of your budget?
I can address that if you'd like. Okay. So we set up multiple work orders. The DSQA payments on this contract are for internal work. So if facilities management runs into like a piping elbow of asbestos, we can come in and abate that for them. When it comes to capital support, like tunnel ventilation, we cut work orders under this contract that charge to their specific fund. So we bill those projects separately. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does answer a question. But should the authorization come from their program versus your? It seems like it's an accounting exercise. We have to increase your authorization in order for them to pay you?
So we have to increase the well, this might be more of a contract. You want to kick it over to Ms. Holland?
Good morning again. So as far as the budget, this is not, your approval today is the authorization for us to pay the contract. So it's not a budget per se, if I'm trying to explain that correct. This fund should already be in the budget before we come to you. You're authorizing us as contracts, procurement materials to continue to pay vendors and things like that for them to use the contract. Does that make sense? I'm hoping I'm clear.
Yeah, I would assume that you have several different accounts that you pull money from, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
And I would assume that some accounts would be capital improvement programs for different projects where we're going to get FTA funding from. Some accounts would be, as Chairman Floyd said, be local money that we would pull money from. And so I'm just trying to understand. You mentioned that you have to support the CIP projects.
Right.
And I'm trying to understand internally, how do we account for that?
So that's the budget piece.
Yeah, right. So each separate budget and needs support will pay for their own support, right? It all just funnels into this contract. And this allows us for consistency, safety when it comes to abatement services. So we just don't have a random abatement company coming in here and dealing with hazardous materials. We can kind of control our compliance with EPA and OSHA standards.
Any other questions? With no questions, I'll entertain a motion on agenda item number 6. It has been moved and seconded. I did vote this time. And that
didn't mean to
resolution
vote against.
passes. Ms. Blakely, did you?
No, that was not intentional.
Okay. Please make sure that Ms. Blakely is recorded as in the affirmative.
Thank you.
There we go. All right. Ms. Hubble, you will remain at the podium and give us a briefing on what you just discussed.
So good morning again, Chairman Worthy, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. McKinney, and members of the committee. May I direct your attention to agenda item number 7. This is a briefing on the Safety, Health, and Industrial Hygiene Consulting Services follow-on contract, which will be AE 50139. As discussed in the previous item, the current version of this contract expires at the end of FY23. Next slide, please. The follow-on contract will have a similar scope of services to the existing contract. These services support environmental health and safety programs authority-wide on an on-call basis. At a high level, these services include the following programs: hazardous materials, confined space, industrial hygiene, indoor air quality, biological safety, engineering controls, safety support and audits, and laboratory services that support the work above. Next slide, please. There are a variety of hazardous materials that we manage in accordance with Environmental Protection Agency and Occupational Safety and Health Administration regulations. Many of these hazardous materials at MARTA are found in buildings constructed prior to 1980. Those materials include asbestos, lead-based paint, mercury switches, and ballasts that contain polychlorinated biphenyls or PCBs. There are other hazardous materials that we manage that come from building conditions, such as mold, avian waste, and sewage. Activities associated with these materials include conducting surveys, condition assessments and inspections, posting appropriate labeling and signage, and conducting abatement or remediation of those materials. The contract also provides for oversight of abatement and remediation contractors to ensure their activities are in line with EPA and OSHA regulations. Next slide, please. This contract supports the Confined Space Program by conducting assessments of confined spaces and ensuring they are labeled appropriately. We capture attributes of each space in our ArcGIS Confined Space database, which is available to maintenance staff. We also conduct training for confined space entrants, attendants, supervisors, and rescue personnel. Next slide, please. The contract supports industrial hygiene services, which include conducting exposure assessments for chemicals, noise, heat and cold, vibration, radiation, and other hazards. These exposure assessments assist us in identifying appropriate mitigations or controls to reduce or eliminate risks to employees. We can perform personal or area air monitoring for a wide variety of chemicals or other constituents in the air. For example, we used area air monitoring to confirm that our ionization systems installed in our facilities and vehicles during the COVID pandemic were not producing any hazardous byproducts. Services also include evaluating engineering controls and personal protective equipment to ensure their effectiveness. We also conduct indoor air quality assessments and run our respiratory protection program under this contract. Next slide, please. The contract scope includes additional services such as biosafety, general safety support, including auditing, and laboratory services are associated with hazardous materials, indoor air quality, and confined space assessments. Next slide, please. We will request a 5-year base contract with 5 one-year extension options for the follow-on contract. This term is reflective of the need to continually operate these programs without disruption. The contract will continue to work on an on-call basis. While diversity and inclusion has not yet evaluated the terms of the contract, the current contract has a 25% DBE goal. The anticipated value of the contract will be around $3 million per year. This amount is based on current spending and factors in costs for unknown tasks as MARTA quickly moves forward with expansion and renovation projects. The contract functions on a time and materials basis, so we will only spend what is necessary to complete the required work. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time and support.
Thank you, Ms. Hubble. Any questions on this briefing?
Yeah, Thomas,
Mayor Floyd?
quick question. Are we subject to OSHA? Do they inspect us?
Well, that's a complicated question, but yes. Mr. McKinney, would you prefer to take that?
Your answer is correct. We're not under their jurisdiction, but if we have a complaint, they will come over and do an investigation and inspection.
And of course, our contractors are subject to OSHA, so.
Okay, and this is a briefing only.
Yes.
Do you have to come back for a resolution to advertise this contract?
My understanding is for an A&E contract, we do not.
Okay.
We would come back when we have the selected awardee.
I was just going to say thank you. This is not a fun topic, but very necessary to protect our public as well as our employees, and I appreciate the efforts in this area. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, Ms. Blakely?
Oh,
These plexiglass frames throw off reflection big time. Okay, no other questions or comments. Thank you very much, Ms. Hubble. I will direct committee members to know that in your packet is an informational item for the January operations and safety KPIs. And with no other business coming before ops and safety, I will adjourn this meeting.
Management Committee meeting for Thursday, March the 31st, 2022. Can all the board members sign in? We're there? Okay, thank you. First item on the agenda is approval of the February 24th, 2022 Business Management Committee meeting minutes. Are there any, first of all, are there any additions do we need to make to the agenda? Are there any changes? Okay. So what we have next is the approval of the meeting minutes from February 24th. Can I get a motion? Second? All right, it's been moved in second. All right, can you vote? Okay. Okay. All right, we have, all right. Is it corrected? There it is. Okay, 8, okay, the agenda has been approved in the meeting minutes. The first item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing a modification in the contractual authorization for contracts utilizing the state of Georgia contracts and/or general services administration. The schedules for network, server, storage equipment, and professional services. Mr. Kirk Talbert, AGM Technology, you have the floor, Mr. Talbert.
Thank you, Chairman Frierson, Mr. Greenwood, Mr. Hurley, members of the Business Management Committee. This morning, if you could advance the slide, please. This morning, I'm requesting authorization to expand a contract that we entered into in 2017 for the enterprise storage for the agency. Think of it as the large hard drive that stores our critical records. Here you see this expansion will allow us to support a full 3 years of 911 emergency call recordings, CCTV video, capacity for backups, and other data storage. This request is to add an additional $1.837 million to the contract. You can see here the split out between the capital and operating. The majority of this funding in the amount of $1,080,000, $80,088.80, which is actually hard to say, is capital funding to add the actual capacity to the hard drive. We're adding 2.5 petabytes of data storage, and the remaining $756,000 in operating funds is for licensing that goes along with that, that allows us to support that storage. If you'll advance to the next slide, please. Here again is the breakout, and here's the history of the procurement. We originally came before the board for approval for this storage system in 2017. We implemented it. We've built the network and the agency's storage capacity on top of this. And at this point in time, this request is to authorize funds to allow us to expand that capacity with the growing need for video, data, and other storage necessities. That concludes my request for this authorization.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Talbert. Are there any questions from the board members concerning this resolution? Any discussion? Okay, so hearing none, I'll call the question. Can we vote on the resolution? All right, it's been moved and second. I think we're missing one more vote. Okay. All right. Mr. Snyder? Okay, they're working on it. Okay, it's been passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing the solicitation of proposals for the procurement of financial advisory services, RFP P50119. Mr. Bill Bailey, Manager, Financial Planning and Analysis.
Thank you, Mr. Frierson. Good morning, Mr. Frierson,
Okay.
Mr. Durrett, members of the Business Management Committee, Mr. Greenwood, and Mr. Hurley. I am here today to request the Business Management Committee vote to approve the resolution for the MARTA Board of Directors to authorize the solicitation of proposals for financial advisory services. Next slide, please. Today, we will discuss the background and the requested Business Management Committee action. Next slide, please. The requested solicitation is for financial advisory services to replace the current contract P363399 that expires on September 30th of this year. The financial advisor, or FA, assists with the execution of capital market transactions which are to fund the MARTA's capital program. These transactions are at the lowest cost and with significant savings for bond refunding transactions. This service supports the authority's priority of delivering the capital program with speed and efficiency. The FA assists the finance staff with the following: independent advice of a comprehensive plan of finance, which includes the planning, structuring, sizing, and timing, long and short-term financial modeling, review of financial transaction products and structures, lease versus buy analysis, debt portfolio accounting support, and fuel hedge audit testing. The contract is for 5 years with a 1-year base and 4 one-year options. Estimated cost is $750,000 over the 5-year life of the contract. Under law, the authority is required to have a third-party financial advisor in order to receive solicitations of cost-saving products and initiatives by invoking the Securities and Exchange Commission Municipal Advisor Rule under the Dodd-Frank Act. Next slide, please. Approval of this resolution only allows for execution of the solicitation process. During the solicitation process, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion will evaluate this procurement for DBE and small business opportunities. Final contract award is subject to approval by the MARTA Board of Directors. At this time, I respectfully request that the members of the Business Management Committee vote to permit staff to execute the solicitation of proposals for financial advisory services through a competitive RFP process. Next slide, please. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bailey. Appreciate it. Okay, board members, questions? Yes,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
thank you for the presentation, but I'm very concerned that your budget is too low. We got a lot of money that we're managing out there, and we want to make sure we have, can get you the analysis when these banks are pitching different cost-saving ideas.
Okay, understandable. Any other questions, comments? I do have one. I understand that we're going to determine the DBE goal after the solicitations comes in. Is that my understanding?
Yes, they'll review, well.
Is that fair?
Paula.
Or how do we determine that? Ms. Paula Nash?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it's not after the solicitation comes in, it's during the process.
Okay.
So as our office will get something from Contracts and Procurement once they have the full scope of work so that we can then develop the opportunities for DBEs, and then we will start looking at setting the goal at that process.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Yes, Mr. Floyd.
I don't understand this. And also, who does this? Who are the people that do this? That are, I mean, how do you assemble a qualified list of people that could do this? It looked like to me they'd work for Merrill Lynch or somebody, if they're going to do this. And then I'm not sure I understand what you're asking for here. Maybe, so don't take a lot of time doing this because everybody else probably understands it. But I'm just having a little trouble deciphering exactly what you're asking for here and what the difference. If we're going to do a bond sale, are you looking for somebody to help figure out the right way to do the bond sale other than the bond So you're nodding, so I guess I do understand it maybe a little bit.
Yes, these are financial advisors. It's a variety of firms. Current one is First Tryon and Hilltop Securities. So, yes, they are certain firms that do these financial advisory services.
But there's room here for a tremendous conflict of interest, it looks to me like. I mean, because whoever might bid this might also bid on some other financial tool or something that we're doing, no?
Well,
No, you want me to step in, Bill?
yes. Okay.
Yes, sir. Mr. Floyd, these are third parties that when they agree to enter into this particular contract, they are not participating on the opposite side of the financing transactions. That had been previously done many years ago, but that's part of what the legislation that Bill was discussing earlier moved to prevent in the future. So they have to wall themselves off. We may have a firm or two that would bid that does participate in financial advisory and/or the banking side of things, but they're separate, and we typically would not entertain working with a group like that. We want them to be independent third parties.
Okay, and you're looking for one name or one firm?
It's typically one firm and an associated DBE firm that's brought in as well. The firm that we have currently, Hilltop Securities, is based out of Dallas. And so they brought in a third firm, First Tryon, that has a local presence. So we could have someone that could be here when we needed them in town. So that's the current contract.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chairperson
So-
Scott? Go ahead.
In regards to the statement under law, then I would assume that this is also identified as a process for all transit agencies?
Yes, ma'am, actually, yes, transit agencies and
So
other
we-
people that hire them.
Right, so we would have, so it's not only MARTA, it's all transit agencies,
It is,
correct?
ma'am.
it's
And so
transits.
therefore, it would be firms that have identified themselves as SMEs or subject matter experts in the various areas. So they are
Yes.
specifically designed for what we're looking for, so to speak.
Yes, ma'am,
All right,
yes.
great.
You're
Thank you.
correct.
Chairperson Snyder first, and then Mr. Mullis.
Thank you, Chairman Ferguson. I just got a operational question about how these financial consultants are used internally. So can any department consult with this consultant about an issue in terms of a proposed capital project? Or in other words, is there a limit? Because we only have a $150,000 a year kind of budget. So if they get calls every day, that's going to blow up the budget. So how does it work functionally?
Yeah, it would be for the finance staff, but you are correct. It could be like the capital. We need some consultation on the capital program and its capacity for bonding. So in that concern, it would be correct, yes. It would help the capital programs.
Okay. I think, okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Chairperson Mullis, Mr. Mullis? You good? Your questions answered? Okay. Any other questions by the board members? Okay. I know that this is something that we've done last year and the previous years to have this financial advisor as part of the oversight of that process, and so this is just an extension of that. All right. Any other questions from the board? Okay. Hearing none. Can I get a second on the motion? So been moved in second. All right. Any discussion? Okay. All right. Have a vote concerning the resolution. All right. The resolution has passed. Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
The other matters on the agenda is the FY 2022 January financial highlights and financial performance indicators. This is for information only. The board members have been sent this information so that you can take a look at it. Do we have any questions while Mr. Hewley is here? Yes, Chairperson Hahn.
It was just a comment. I reviewed them, and I just wanted to say thank you. It's rare that you see revenues up and expenses down in today's world, so thank you.
I mean, the
Mr. Floyd?
difference between expenditures and revenues this last period, last month, was significant. As to what the reasoning behind that is, I mean, if there's a reason for that?
Yes, sir. It's the same reasons that we've been experiencing throughout the year. We're seeing larger vacancies. So on the expense side of things, so we're seeing less in our salaries that we would typically present and/or healthcare benefits. And then from the revenue side, the sales tax has been performing well beyond our budget. And likewise, the ridership is actually higher than budget. So we underestimated our initial ridership projections for the year. So
Good.
we're doing good in both of those aspects as well.
Okay, good. And only one comment kind of off a little bit here is these supply chain issues, and I've been dealing with these things a little bit in my life. They are going to be enormous, and they are still going to be effective. And I think as we get into this capital program, but also in the state of good repair and other stuff, we're going to experience, as everybody is, tremendous problems getting stuff to work with, and materials of all types and all things. And I'm trying to figure out how that's going to impact budget from a lot of different ways. One is you just can't get stuff done. That's the first thing. It scares me a little bit about going into this capital program, not knowing where product is coming from. And it's simple stuff like concrete pipe and stuff like that that's really slowing down. Every bit of work that I'm watching, seeing done, is just having problems with supply chain issues. And then when you read in the paper like you are, that China is having the same kind of difficulties producing stuff and getting stuff. So this may be a factor of the last 2 years, the pandemic and the COVID stuff. Is maybe the impact hadn't been that great over the last 2 years, but it's going to be great over the next 2 years. Somebody smarter than me is going to have to think about that and kind of figure out how that fits into what we're trying to accomplish here at MARTA, as everybody is, cities and counties, and everybody's trying to figure out how it's going to impact quality of life over the next few years. So, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. Chairperson Mullis, Mr. Mullis?
Thank you, Chairman Friesen. Kudos again, Kevin, and the team over in the Finance Department. Your budgeting has been exemplary. I think we, Board of Director, Mr. Floyd, and I probably sit on a different side of the table, literally and figuratively. He's a contractor, and I'm a developer, and so he's going to think about the risks of things, and I'm going to say the glass is half full all the time. And from that perspective, I'm very encouraged about the sales tax, and the sales tax is going to give us just a little cushion. And we talked about the positions, and we save money on the positions. And I'm going to ask something provocative. We have 665 positions open, looks like to me. Do we need to get rid of those positions? Do we need to scale back service permanently? I believe we're on our bus schedule a weekend schedule. Do we have we destroyed demand for our services, and should we scale back those 665 positions?
I had a comment, so
And along those lines, when I hear the increase in ridership, I think about the presentation by our interim CEO to Atlanta on yesterday, where ridership was discussed, and it was said ridership was down. And so now I'm hearing something that's going to have of concern to me especially with what we hear is going on about increase in sales tax, and we're talking about light rail versus BRT. And so I anticipate that we're going to have to answer specifically as to is ridership up, is ridership down, sales tax, where are we with what we're proposing in the area of projects? Not questioning the data, but questioning what was presented there specifically in Atlanta, as opposed to what we're hearing today. This is a very slippery slope, so.
Okay, understandable.
Does that make sense to? Yes, thank you.
Mr. Greenwood.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Chair Scott. And Mr. Mullis, I will answer in tandem. So yesterday's presentation was about actual ridership. So our ridership is, in bus terms, is about 53% of pre-COVID ridership. So that's just a fact that fewer people are using the system. What Mr. Hurley was referring to was our actual versus budget. So when they set the budgets last year, we anticipated that COVID would have had a worse effect on our ridership, and so they budgeted accordingly. When the actual ridership surpassed what, our doomsday scenario budgeting. So it's better than that, but it's still not what it was pre-COVID. That's the reconciliation of those two statements. And when it comes to, go ahead, Chair Scott.
No, I was going to say, because what I heard in listening to that meeting yesterday was no desire from the elected officials concerning scaling back. They were asking about where we were and basically asking from the council members, when were we going to get back to pre-COVID scheduling?
Correct.
Is what they were saying they heard from their constituents.
Absolutely. So that's the tandem response to Mr. Mullis is that, what we've done to use something that reflects a Saturday schedule, it's not exactly Saturday, is because we had, it's really not about ridership, it's about workforce availability. So we didn't want to continue to schedule as usual and then have the customer find on any given day willy-nilly that the bus wasn't available. We wanted to put truth in advertising and give them a schedule that they could rely on. So we've done that. Of the routes that have been affected, we've already started to bring, I don't remember the number, some 15 to 18 routes back onto regular schedule, and we'll continue doing that because it's really about, our core business is providing this scheduled service. So as long as we have the resources to do that, and we've heard today that those resources are coming back slowly, we owe the public that core commitment that the buses are going to arrive when scheduled. Should the day come that, we're continuing to provide this robust schedule and nobody's riding, then I think that's a conversation that we would have to have. But in the short term, it seems that ridership, the elasticity of ridership is such that it's coming back with the service that we provide.
So we should be very aggressive in hiring these 650 positions that we have out there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And to that point, I understand that we have been very aggressive really in trying to fill these positions. And one has to be careful about reducing the expectation of staffing when right now we need to get as many people as we can, because the demand will come back. And when it comes back, I believe it's going to swing back very heavy, and we want to be in a position to reach that and meet that. And once again, we're very fortunate because I remember when we had these planning discussions about how COVID was going to impact us. Once again, we planned for it to be devastating for us, to be honest with you, so we thought it would be a great deal of loss. We have been fortunate with what has happened with the revenue that we have received from the COVID situation and the revenue received from the federal government. And so now we're in a position where we're healthy enough where we can keep building and expanding. And I think we need to keep our eye on the goal of trying to expand this enterprise. And once again, and staff it at the level that will be suitable in 20 years from now. And so I look forward to us doing just that. Chairperson Scott.
Yes, I just wanted to add to that in regards to performance. What we heard, and you were there, Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
and those, Ms. Blakely, that participated in the SMDO meeting, I believe, at the airport. We heard from the jurisdictional elected officials their desire for us to continue in the area of transportation because of their expectation of growing their jurisdictions in the upcoming years. So we definitely don't want to be looking at in any way to scale back, but instead to be able to provide what they're looking at as mass transit for the public. So.
Sheriff
Thank you.
Ryerson,
Yes.
I don't know if you can see my light over here.
Yes.
So, and kind of piggybacking on what Rita has said, and maybe changing direction a little bit, but in regards to spending, this actually speaks to the capital sources slide. Our actual spending versus our budgeted spending, the actual is way below the budgeted. So is that because of supply chain, vacancies, like just looking at this, to me, it would say that we aren't being progressive enough in getting things done. And I just want to make sure that I understand that, because like right now, and pretty much to me, it seems like it's a consensus of the board, is like, we want to see things happen. We want to make sure that things are moving, that we're being progressive and we're moving forward, getting these projects executed. So why is the discrepancy so large between the actual spending versus the budgeted spending?
A great question. I'm going to let Mr. Majid address that question.
Thank you. So a couple of reasons, and one is how the budget was set up is the ambition exceeded the ability to deliver for the fiscal year 22 capital budget. And some of that has to do with getting the right administrative infrastructure in place. So we had earlier today in the Planning and Capital Programs Committee, the centralized program management office and resourcing that. And so we're building up that ability to provide wraparound services to project managers to help them deliver projects. So that's a big piece of it, is the administrative infrastructure, and also working through an expansion program and working with the community to get a comfort level as to the definition of the projects that we're going to deliver. And that's on the expansion side. On the state of good repair side, in addition to the administrative infrastructure, it's bringing in the personnel to do the work as well. So I think what you'll see when we come to the board for the budget season for fiscal year 23 is a well thought out draft capital budget for fiscal year 23 with right sizing the program for how it matches scope, schedule, and budget, and wrapping around resources for it. So candidly, you're going to see this spend rate not be where we want it to be for fiscal year 22. But going forward, we expect to see a dramatic improvement in our ability to deliver projects, and the spend rate you'll see accordingly.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And then I had another question.
Yes. Chairperson
Our
Bacon.
debt service is like $83 million.
Mhm.
And maybe this is another discussion that we have at a later date, but I would just like to understand why that number is so large, and if it's prudent for us to have a debt service that is $83 million.
Okay, understandable. Mr. Hurley, you want to try to address that? Okay.
The debt service is a function of the capital spend from the years that MARTA was built out. If you would look at probably the last 10 years or so, we've kept it at somewhat of a flat level. We've done a lot of bond refundings that have saved us hundreds of millions of dollars in debt service over the life of the bonds that we do have. And we're trying to also utilize more of the sales tax from the standpoint of the CARES Act and the ARP Act, and we're trying to utilize that sales tax surplus to support capital. As you'll note, our reserves have built up considerably, and we're looking at utilizing a significant portion of those to support capital rather than issuing more debt for the projects going forward. So it is high. It's well within our debt coverage limitations. It's well within the debt service policy set by the board as well as the MARTA Act. So we're trying to balance all these things and still execute the program, and if we can, drive that down. So
Thank you, appreciate that. And once again, as these programs, as these projects begin to come online and we begin to build and expand, I'm pretty sure you'll see a great deal of these resources be absorbed in this whole process, and that's what we want to be able to be prepared for. So any other questions before the board members? And I do want to take this moment to say thank you to our senators and congresspersons who we visited a few weeks ago at the National APTA Convention in Washington. They are very, very supportive, as you have heard, about MARTA and about transportation for the metropolitan area as well as for Georgia. And we just want to say thank you to all our congresspersons and senators who have supported us. Once again, it's our opportunity now to execute on these projects, deliver these projects into our communities, into our jurisdictions, and expand this enterprise to a level that we have never ever seen before. So if we all just, once again, roll up our sleeves and double our efforts to do this across this enterprise, this will be possible. So I look forward to it, all right? Any other questions before this board? Hearing none, I consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.